Hello and welcome to the Pinkbike podcast. My name is Henry, and this week I'm joined in studio. We've finally worked it out, Matt, how to have two people in the same room. Crazy.
Look at us go.
Look at us go with Matt Beer and Dario Desquiglio coming to us from which state prison are you in after that awful business in New York, Dario?
I'm not allowed to say, but
it's amazing that they actually, they
start
let you
broadcasting signals.
Yeah, they still let you attend the Pinkbike podcast, but I know they must have some members of Big Bike.
It's a work release program. Yeah.
Hey, at the weekend there was obviously a big race on, a sort of a young, new, brave discipline. Some familiar names in there, some names you might not expect, but big questions in the audience whether this is now going to become a bigger series. And I am, of course, talking about the Snow Bike World Championships. What is it about this race that gets everyone so excited?
Everything, man. From the foot out, top to bottom, to the hilariously stupid fenders. The Snow Bike World Championship is really what mountain bikers have been asking for. It's so fucking funny to me.
Okay.
It's so dumb.
So if they do the Snow Bike World Champs, should they do like the ski equivalent? Should they just like ski on grass in the summer?
I think they should. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. They got to do dirt moguls. Like, full on.
Why not? Right?
Okay. There have been many times where over this last 2-3 years of Discovery stuff, I've been like, don't get me wrong, happy to say maybe this could be better. Yeah, but largely I've been like, maybe they got a plan.
Yeah,
some things about the sport needed to change, but this is fucking nuts. I cannot, there's this idea of so the UCI, the World Cycling Body, obviously has a mandate to get cycling to the people. The idea that the people better served are people that don't give a fuck in French ski resorts, not people in Asia or Africa who want a World Cup.
Right.
It's absolutely insane. I just think it is nuts. But anyway.
My only guess is they signed like a too sweet to pass up deal with some European ski resort company, and that is the genesis of this, because I it isn't a good. I think like what Discovery has done really well is made their products packaged nicely and look good. Like they've made the filming of World Cups really effective and efficient and impressive, and like they've made that repeatable. I don't think the Snow Bike World Championships achieves that in quite the same way.
Matt, does it make a mockery of the sport to a degree? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, you still have people competing at a pretty high level. It is difficult. But
no doubt. I mean, it's clearly hard. Like it looks difficult.
But it's, like I said, if you draw the inverse comparison there, like it does seem foolish, right? Like imagine skiing on grass. Why?
Mm-hmm. Why? Yeah, I know. I think also just the comparison this week between that and Hardline, is pretty brutal. One's free to air. All the racers are like dead keen on it. It seemed like people are risking huge amount of, their own bodies on the line just because they love it, and it's pretty stark. Did you watch the racing this week, Matt?
I did. Yeah, I caught it afterwards.
Nice.
Caught the replay.
What do you think of Hardline in general?
I think it's pretty cool. Yeah.
Me too.
A lot of the top riders are able to still push on the track. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of riders coming into this, type of course, this newer format that Red Bull's putting on with, pushing the sport, obviously. And I think that's cool to see those other riders like step up and be able to ride the whole course. Racing it is another level still.
Yeah.
And you saw a lot of the top riders even figure that out in their race runs or seeding runs. They're like, oh, I'm now overshooting this jump. I was just trying to clear. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to digest there in terms of speed and racecraft.
Dario, I'm not so down with the kids as you. I worry about people getting injured. I worry
me too.
about, but it does seem like it's a very zeitgeisty moment in mountain biking with this combination of basically it's like true free racing, if you see what I mean. That sort of,
for sure.
But it's also the best World Cup riders are getting it done. I mean, Ace of Amat coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, What's your take? Do you think that, how to put this? Because to me, I think of Group B rallying. I think
I think that's a really good analogy.
Paper mache roll bars.
It's going to be the most exciting. It's going to be the most dangerous, and it's going to appeal to a niche within a niche. But it's definitely a killer race. Like, I thought it was so impressive. I watched like every bit of pre-race coverage there was as well, just because it was entertaining and crazy. Like, it's really rare that you get such a well-documented look at people like pushing their limits on a daily basis. And I think that the fact that it culled so much of the field is proof that it's really gnarly. But the fact that 30 odd people were able to get down at least most of that course is pretty incredible. I'm curious to see if it spans beyond just Tasmania and Wales as far as a circuit goes. It's clearly a huge investment just to build those courses. Like, you look at what Simon French and his crew had to do at the bike park to build that track. It's like so much work and money investment, and they killed it. Like, it looks so cool. I'd love to go at some point just to see it in person. Like, it's definitely, to me, it's a more entertaining event than Rampage. And I think that that's a really strong win for the Red Bull team.
Mm-hmm. I think you brought up a good point there where you were talking about sort of like the personal goals to like seeing everybody tick off the course. I think having everybody's like social take and so much behind the scenes with a concentrated field that you really get to feel what the rider's feeling. You're like, oh, these are the world's best riders, and they're finding it challenging. They're having these unfortunate crashes and stuff, but a lot of them are overcoming that too. So you really get that insight to how difficult it really is compared to a regular, free ride event or a World Cup race. It's a different ballgame for sure.
Something that occurred to me as well was that in terms of when you see World Cup events come to areas you might not immediately have thought of for mountain biking, it's not always the best advertisement for as a resort. So, for instance, I would say something like Leogang, which people go, like, the race has been there for years. It's that sort of bike park Leogang, or that sort of kingdom of whatever it is, that Sailback whole setup. I don't think actually sometimes the World Cup does it a service, because you have riders come in there that sometimes in past years complained about the track, talked about sort of all these restrictions. And I thought it was really interesting because with Medina, I didn't know that much about it, but I know that, wow, it must be cool because it's got Hardline there. Yeah. In terms of as a resort or a location, it really, same with Dovey, like it puts it on the map in a way that is so credible and raw compared to what can be perceived as a more sanitized, maybe there's just one trail there sort of approach in World Cup racing. And yeah, I mean, again, it just, the field is a lot smaller. It's not comparable in some ways, but in the other ways, it's a very brutal comparison compared to what's the UCI, because they want there to be, Australian people, believe it or not, want there to be a race in Australia at some point. Maybe not slap bam in the middle of the season, but maybe earlier or towards the end. And as we're seeing this World Cup series getting more and more consolidated for viable cost-cutting reasons in Europe, it kind of, I think it's quite a hard comparison.
Yeah, but then again, you look at
amazingly popular race in this location. They don't have World Cup racing.
Yeah, it seems like most of the pros are in New Zealand at some point pre-season anymore. It's the place to go if you're trying to train on a downhill bike, and I don't see why you wouldn't just add something there. It's almost like free publicity. It's not, but you have a captive audience. You have summer somewhere else. You could enterprise on that. And I'm not proposing like a year-round race schedule, but some sort of preseason thing. I mean, in a way, Hardline is that, but given the fact that it's so gnarly, I don't foresee too many of the top racers entering on a regular basis, just because the odds of fucking your entire season are decently high. Like, Jackson, who won this year, didn't last year, and it took him out for an entire season. Like, I don't know.
Imagine you're a team owner and you put a lot of money into a hot prospect who's going to come. Maybe they've just sort of like really begun to prove themselves on the elite level, and you put a lot of investment. You've got all the staff, everything, and they say, "Boy, oh boy, wouldn't it be nice to go ride some 80-foot jumps at 100k an hour in a race format?" For a non-UCI sanctioned event, which basically pumps up the cool factor of an energy drinks company.
It's a tough call. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in that position, luckily, so I don't have to make the hard choice. But I do know that like some team managers struggle with this. Like I talked with a few people like at the end of last season who had, skin in the game here. And I think that for a lot of them, it was a tough choice. Like in the end, you kind of have to let your athlete do what they want just to keep them happy to some degree. But you also have to like be the voice of reason when it comes to risk. I don't know. I think the publicity of it is undeniable. Like that's a huge value add, but it's risky for sure.
Matt, when you were giving the World Cups a crack, if you'd got an invite to something like Hardline, which, because some of these riders, they're not all top level World Cup races. You're seeing some more, definitely not grassroots, that'd be unfair, but up and coming elite riders hoping to make their name or maybe just showcase the amazing skills they have. As we know, the field is so depth, and I think with downhill mountain biking, there is the speed factor, but some of these riders are just amazingly skilled. And they're incredible bike riders, maybe more than they are bike racers. If someone said, "Hey, young Matthew Beer, put down that skateboard and put that cap the right way around. We're getting serious. Do you want to come to Hardline?" What would you have said?
I would definitely go. Like as a privateer, there were a couple other riders there that are not on a factory team or maybe not at the same level, and I think there's this level you have to rise to, but it's also not expected that you have to race. So you do get that platform to go there and say like, "Hey, I can do a couple of these jumps, but I'm smart enough. I want to save myself for the rest of the season. So maybe I'm not going to race." And they still get a fair bit of publicity from that and a lot of experience too, I'd imagine. So I think to not go at all would maybe be short-sighted, but then to push it beyond what you're capable of and risk a whole season might be also short-sighted.
I mean, you look at like,
I'd be smart about that.
Like Theo Erlangsson, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, like kind of stepping away from World Cup racing, but doing more events like this almost makes sense to me for some athletes. Like it's a slimmer calendar in theory. You don't have to do quite as much back to back to back, but you can focus on these like gnarlier, more public one-off things. I think that makes sense for some people.
Yeah, and the other Colombian rider, Sebastian Hoagland, I think that was really cool to see him. And he also did really well at the Wales one as well. So like, I think that really elevated him as a rider and also like his credibility as a rider.
Right, because he otherwise just does the Cerro Bajo, the like urban DH stuff, right?
Yeah, I think they were doing some World Cups as well.
Cups. Yeah, he was on that. Well, I think what's really interesting, I was speaking to when it was that transition team before it was Transition Factory Racing. I think it was like Mutt Society or something when Valentino Reyes Sanchez was coming up in a first year junior. And I was speaking to the team manager there, and he was saying, I mean, it's just, you take so much stuff for granted, I think, in terms of visas, where you're from, where until you hear about the other side. And he was saying, as Colombians, it's so hard for them to get visas just to get to World Cups.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
And it's just something you don't even, and we talk about where the World Cup's got to go. And, obviously I'm jibing and saying it should go to these places, but also, the places that people find it harder to get out of are also the places, I know, that it's more expensive and it's less likely to go. And so it's really difficult to balance the needs of both. But I was actually stoked to see Sebastian on that MS team because I think he's such a talent and he's amazingly, you see some of them, he'd always be one of those riders. He reminded me a bit of Ronan Dunn, that sort of winning practice. I think he got that podium in snowshoe in the juniors. I think he got third in 2022. And you can see it meant a lot to him. And also it was like on that, not roll the dice course, that'd be unfair, but those changeable conditions of that race with that slippery, horrible mud, I think
less predictable.
And I just thought it was super cool to see him land on that team. And I also think it's cool to see Zeroed go. In some ways it feels, although they were never together, MS and Zeroed, it seems like it works. A weird throwback of sort of Zeroed. You know, I remember lusting one of those G2s, and MS I think they're the oldest World Cup team.
Oh, true.
I believe so, yeah. Like in terms of actual one consistent entity, I think they're the oldest World Cup team. And I thought it was super cool to see them combine. And wouldn't it, you know, the crazy thing is they won that Intense last year. That could have, so the Intense is an interesting bike because it doesn't have to have its kinematics revised to fit that gearbox. Because it can just basically just chop that down tube off and cut that bottom bracket out, pop one of them in. And imagine if Eleonora Farina had won. She'd have $100,000 richer.
And shit.
I mean, Gates
she might have dropped it belt
because it would have been
in the mud. So
I mean, she might have been, but the whole belted purse thing would have been over.
Yeah,
I'm sure they almost didn't want to win in the first season because it would just be.
Yeah, it didn't pick up traction until this year. Like, I feel like people weren't really talking about it quite as much, but now that all these teams have announced that they're pursuing it, it's kind of a bigger hoopla.
Maybe it did need a bit of planning in terms of like setting up the bike, like you said, and aligning other sponsors and stuff like that. So
I think that's a big thing. Yeah. Okay, well, let's get on to some show and tells because Matt, you and I had a lovely morning of me standing in the cold by the car and you doing many laps on an e-bike because we did a blind front tire test. This was, for me, as someone with a keen interest in mountain biking tech, something that I was so stoked on doing. I thought it was super interesting and being the sort of the handyman to help facilitate this was super cool. So if you haven't watched the video, it came out 2 days ago. Basically, the premise was very simple. A lot of front tires seemingly look the same. You've got, whether it's a Maxxis, Kenda, Michelin, Schwalbe, or Continental, they all have a front tire that basically looks like the same, says it's going to do, everything you could ever want from a front tire, etc., etc. So we thought, wouldn't it be good if we got 5 front wheels, all exactly the same rim, same hub, same spoke tension. We then had 5 different tires on these rims. We blacked out the sidewalls, did laps with a massive mud guard on. He couldn't see what he was riding. And then, hey presto, we managed to rank the tires in what is a long, at one point it gets a little bit confusing, but if you bear with it, you're going to get some good editorial clarity. There's a lot of numbers floating around, but we had to do it that way because our brains couldn't comprehend it another. Matt, we've had a couple of weeks to digest on this, had a couple of weeks to think about it. We recorded the video and your results, you had that Schwalbe with the radial casing coming out on top. Now you've had a bit of time to digest, reflect. How do you feel about your results? Is there anything you wanted to add? Anything you kind of later considered? Because sometimes you think 2 days later you'll be minding your own business, making a cup of tea, and you'll go, "Wait a minute, the edge hold or whatever."
It's usually at like 11 o'clock. I'm lying in bed. I'm like, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
And then 3 o'clock rolls around. I'm like, "Oh shit, I should probably write this down and just forget about it."
How looking back, I don't know, we called Hear Your Reflections on what was a super cool experiment.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat. We had, talked about this for a long time, and for one reason or another, it took longer to get off the ground, but I was stoked to make it happen. And yeah, so thanks for coming out there and swapping all those things and setting up the control and keeping everything blind. So yeah, for people who haven't seen it, we basically lapped this blue intermediate single track trail with like some low angle berms, a couple of rocks and roots. Something that was very repeatable was what we were looking for, and a chance where we could, utilize the tire and try and feel it out. But there were a couple, sort of, I don't know what to call it, things that sort of dumbed it down in terms of feeling the tires out. It was very cold. It was like maybe 1 or 2 degrees. So there was some frost in the ground. And then we were also on an e-bike, and I kind of thought about it before, but didn't really realize till I did 1 lap and then swapped a tire. And I was like, oh shit, I can't really feel that much difference because the e-bike really
masks a lot.
Masks it. Yeah. Muddles it. And So that was one thing that made it a little bit more difficult. But we're also we weren't testing these like A, B, BA, whatever, just 2. It was 5. And I was trying to differentiate and pick out each one. So that was a little bit tougher. And so the end result, I only ended up guessing one of the correct tires.
But that wasn't the point.
That's not the point of it.
Yeah.
But I also didn't want to like undermine how people interpreted my editorial.
I don't think
it's hard.
Yeah. I was like, oh shit, this is not how I wanted to work out.
Yeah.
But it was a real life scenario and everything was blind. So that's just how it is.
I thought it was validating that if you'd guessed all the tires right, and then it would have then undermined the test because you'd have then had our preconceptions and biases attached.
Yeah.
To the type people say, oh no, the Conti rubber does this. And then suddenly, so I thought actually it really was, it proved the test worked and that you didn't know what you were riding, which is what we were there to do. So I would prefer to have it that way where, because your feedback was so consistent and interesting throughout the things that, I mean, listen, Matt, I'm not going to make you blush, but your feedback is incredibly good always. And I mean, when I was testing bikes as well, the minutiae would go into it. And how much I learned from you is just massive. Remember when we got that?
Well, vice versa too. Like,
well, I don't know. I think that you have this, like, when I came to that Sun Peaks field test when I first started, your like innate understanding of what was going on, how to articulate it. I was like, fucking hell, I've got to pull up my socks. This guy's on it. So no, I just thought, it was such an amazing test, and it was super interesting. And imagine if we could. I mean, hopefully, who knows what weird pieces of cut up discount Amazon mudguards I can do to hide potentially forks in the future or something like that. Because wouldn't it be cool if, we always talk about the feeling of the Zeb versus the 38, and then this factor of the Öhlins, and how much of that is just our own bias, and how much can we really, when you're reviewing a Fox 38, can you turn that out? I mean, we really try, and I think that we do a good job, but I think it's fascinating to take it up that extra notch.
Sure.
Dario, we also did something similar on another video that was coming out. This sort of group test, which I'm really excited about. Without going too much into it, or even maybe covering the topic, what do you think is something within cycling? So tires are a great example. What other things do you think would be really good to blind test?
I'd love to do
bike industry,
like dampers, fork dampers, or just fork chassis. Even I tried last year to start rallying together a big group fork test, and I think this year I'm going to make a more concerted effort on that. Part of it was we just couldn't get everything all at once, so my goal would be to do that. But to me, that's I don't know. It's one of the more important things. I think front tire is up there just the same. There's a few things that make the biggest difference on a bike, and it's like brakes, fork, tires to me. I'm not going to do like a aftermarket handlebar group test because that's just personal choice. But, Matt and I tried to do that shock week about 2 years ago, and I thought that was informative, but in the end, pretty difficult to parse out. The chassis we chose was almost too good in that it masked like some of the issues that you might have had with shocks. And I think that it's a more difficult thing to do back to back on, where like a fork, you can really parse out differences a little more quickly.
I think with the shock test, looking back, I think that OE tuning is so good. I think it would have been more interesting if you just got medium on each in terms of rebound and compression.
Agreed.
And then got into it and see if you got a shock off the wall, how close could you tune it? But then that becomes a different thing where it's like, don't get me wrong, you're maybe finding out who's got the most effective clickers,
right? Not
the best performance. And then are you reviewing the right? Do you know what I mean? It opens up other problems.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to share that front tire test, and please do go watch it. It's sort of, as I've kind of left the tech department and I'm now presenting these projects, that's the sort of thing, one of the style of thing that I'll be doing as well with other video essays and partner content, is hopefully just being a platform to then have an expert come in and review something and really get into it. So that's super exciting. Dario, your show and tell is something that I have a keen interest in. It's something that released a couple of weeks ago, heavens knows why we didn't talk about it last week, because
I had a different thing last week, but yeah,
this is something cool. This is the first bike I've seen in a while that I looked at the price and was like, oh my God, I want a new bike. I want a new bike. I want a new bike.
Yeah. The Zocelli Visoko. It is so fucking cool. So Zocelli is a brand I've talked about on the podcast a bit and have reviewed in the past. I had his trail bike, the Narum, about 6 months ago, but this is a new free ride bike. I suppose that's really the term for it. So I think he's calling it hard enduro bike.
For fuck's
it
sake.
is a high pivot with an internal chain drive. I know. I'm sorry.
Enduro. I'm sorry, lads.
I know.
Category aside.
Yeah. So naming conventions aside, it's fucking cool. So it's functionally a high pivot with an idler, but in order to drive that idler with a standard length chain and without any sort of weird drivetrain fuckery, he added a secondary chain in the seat tube that drives this tiny little pinion gears that powers the drivetrain. He acknowledges that there's probably going to be some drag incurred by that just because it's a really small drive ring, but it allows you to, one, use a standard length chain and drivetrain. It doesn't really have too much chain growth. It like that top pinion is so close to the instant center that it doesn't change the effective chain length very much. So little details like that were really well thought up. And then just the simple beauty of like the manufacturing of it is so cool to me. Like he remains a one-man operation. He's doing like all the design, all the web work, all the fabricating, and the price isn't astronomical. And so I'm just impressed by his operation generally. So to me, this is a really cool bike. I don't know that it's going to have like mass appeal necessarily, but I'm super keen to try one. And I think that in time we'll try to get one in for test.
Well, we had for instance, sometimes when we get these high pivots in, a good example would be something like the Trek Slash, where across the editorial department, everyone really liked the way it rode. But there was this thing of, first of all, you see a high pivot on a downhill bike, and because there isn't such a widespread range across the gears, there isn't so much the amount of chain between the smallest gear and the biggest gear. The differential isn't so big. But when you come to an enduro bike and you've got a 52 tooth and a 10 tooth, there's a lot of chain management that needs to happen on the underside as well as on the idler side. So then you get these two rollers, which then we as testers might comment adds an element of drag, or what I think the bigger issue can be sometimes these bikes is they run best with wet lube, but then you ride them in the dry and then they get dusty and cruddy. Or you ride them with dry lube and then they begin to squeak after less time. Would this sort of internal system potentially alleviate one of those concerns, Dario?
It simplifies things, if anything. I think the fact that you have this internal encased chain means there's just less contamination there, and that will help like one half of the drivetrain, and then the other half is experiencing less rollover with no extra cogs in the system. So I think that helps as well. Again, with the tiny pinions.
How do you lube the chain inside?
You access it via either the port on the side where you use the tensioner, or I think through the seat tube. There weren't like diagrams on that, but intuitively I think that's how you'd get there.
You don't just slosh load of just put like a liter in.
I mean, that's what I was thinking. You could almost have it be like a wet casement, if the weight didn't bother you.
Yeah, like a sump.
Yeah, exactly. You have like bath oil in your drivetrain.
Exactly. Yeah, just leave it slosh, glugging down the trail. Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And the cool thing with this to me is like it highlights where a one-off builder can shine. It's like not something you're going to see Specialized come out and make is like an internal drivetrain bike. This is like the wheelhouse of the one-off people, and I think it's like the perfect case for that.
Kind of showcases their sort of their building skills, but also their creativity. It's like almost like a trade show special.
That's
kind
what
of
I was going to say.
It is,
hey,
no doubt.
Look at this.
But then again, it seems like it might work.
Sorry,
I haven't. I mean, there's just the one ride video, and it like doesn't tell you anything. So they're just skidding down mesas. But I'm super curious to ride this bike and see how it works. I think that's the test.
I think that's what's super cool. I mean, how to put this? When you go to, or you see, automotive trade shows, brands bring out crazy concept cars they have no intention on making. The bike industry, maybe sometimes, I remember a couple of years ago, maybe Specialized did a crazy Shiv, their TT bike. They did a tandem Shiv, which was like this crazy concept thing. And that sort of thing maybe happens every now and then, but largely the things that, the rolling chassis that operate eventually get developed into real bikes.
I will say, I've seen this in the bike industry, but it's only internally. Like, I've visited a couple brands where they have these really interesting concept bikes, but they don't reach the light of day. I think because they want to protect the IP that could be contained there. But there are some pretty cool Bondo bikes out there. I'd like to cover one day.
How much IP there is left to mine, though. Oh, we've gone to a 63.75 head angle. Oh, yeah, my God, they've fucking done it.
I bet it comes down more to like fabrication technologies than it does like the Geo and the kinematic. I think it's like, as bicycles get more and more perfect and in a certain way, like more and more an art object, you could start to do some crazy stuff with the chassis.
I think that is very, very fair. And honestly, go check out this. How do you say it? Zocelli?
Zocelli is the brand, and then I think Visoko is the model, which I think translates to high in Czech.
Nice.
High pivot, maybe the state that the designer was in.
Hey, Dario, did you know I've got a German friend who's a sound engineer, and a Czech one too?
Oh gosh! Wow. Damn it!
My friend Ben told me that joke. I thought it was great. Sorry.
Oh, that's funny. I like that.
No, if you're not seeing these images flash on the screen in high definition Technicolor, please do check out the website and have a little look at those bike photos, because it is a thing of beauty. Let's get into some listener questions. We've got 4 to get through this week in no particular order. We're just going to punch into them.
Hey Pinkbike, this is Christian calling from Seattle. I bought a pair of Mavens, put them on the bike, quickly took them off the bike again because the breakpoint wanders. I took them back to the shop, had them bled another time, same thing, talked to a RockShox consultant, a RockShox mechanic, says that you need to massage the calibers in order to get the Mavens to not do that. That's nonsense. Can't ride those brakes.
That's not nonsense.
That has not been mentioned in any.
Okay, well, massaging brakes. It makes it sound like it's like Wagyu beef, where they like rub beer into the cow.
Yeah. You got to do that step.
It's a technical term more than a.
Yeah.
Don't put oil on your brakes.
Right. Do not drip oil sensually on your brakes. Shove a wedge
just
into them.
Just playing Spandau Ballet. Just dip the lighting. What? Okay, so this is sort of.
I'm confused by the order of his question. If he did that massage step and they still suck, then
can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So with the Mavens, they added a new step to the bleed procedure and to the setup generally, where they come with this plastic wedge with like a fat end and a skinny end. You shove the fat end in to retract all the pistons at once. Then you put the skinny end in, advance the brake, do that like 3 times. And in theory, you've gotten all the pistons engaging simultaneously, but you can do it as long as it takes to get those working. For me, I've had a bunch of sets of these and haven't had that step not alleviate any issues. So,
well, I think as well with things that, whether it's brake fluid or suspension fluid, when you've got something that's working under higher pressure, we're trying to get, we're trying to pressurize this fluid more than ever. I think also fluid prep is such a massive, important thing. I know it sounds stupid, but move the fluid slowly from the shelf to your bike. You don't want it glugging around in the bottle. These small things, how you bleed the fluid before you go into it, how you prep your syringes. I feel as brakes have got better, it's made a bigger difference.
It matters, yeah. Can we finish his question? I guess we
didn't hear
the end of it.
I wanted to make that fun joke about the beef, and then I got carried away. We'll go back into it.
I've tried many Mavens now, and they all wander. Now the real question is, I need some stronger brakes. What do I get? Because it's not going to be Mavens. I have a heavy e-bike, the new Norco Range. It comes with code ISCs with 220 up front, thick rotors, and Sinded, and it's not enough. What's my alternative? Because not Mavens. Do I really need to go trick stuff? Is there something else that's strong enough? Thank you.
This is a very, I mean, there is a demand that manufacturers are all too happy to sort of get into the arms race with, of creating this idea about more powerful brakes. Mm-hmm. I'm still knocking about on some Shimano XTs that are 5 years old and seen many horrors.
I mean, they still work
fine for me. But I do notice in some instances, once I got a bike with, say, Haze, maybe, those that sort of really, or those TRPs that we had during a field test, that sometimes the Shimanos do feel a little less, have that ultra high performance, like sort of bam, snap feel.
Yeah.
Matt, you test loads of brakes. I mean, does any of his comments on the Mavens, does that reflect any of your experiences?
I have had some issues with the Mavens, not necessarily under ones that I've prepped, but on other test bikes that have arrived or I've jumped on, they have had issues. So yeah, I would say following the bleed procedure and piston massaging and the whole setup definitely should be followed thoroughly.
Were you able to get them feeling good?
I didn't keep but I'm trying to remember. I did end up keeping one of the test bikes that it happened with, and I was able to resolve the issue.
Okay. Yeah, because I know Mike had some issues with his initial set, kind of same like wandering bite point stuff, and eventually got it sorted just by doing like all the little finicky things. And I think I've had 7 sets long term now, and 1 had wandering issues, and I got it sorted. But
yeah,
I mean, if this guy's like writing them off entirely, then that's fine. You know, choose whatever you want. I would go, if you're not going to ride the Mavens, with the TRP DHR Evos or the Haze Dominions, for like something really strong and maybe a little bit easier to work on.
If you're after consistency, maybe not all out power, but that new Galfa Gustav Pro, sorry, not Galfa, Magura
the
Gustav
Magura.
Pro,
was
made not to actually be any more powerful than the MT7, but just to be the most consistent brake they could make.
Yeah, I do love the MT7s.
It's got similar power.
They're really good brakes.
If you like the power of the MT7s, that is a brake that, I mean, it's 2.5 mil rotors. It's the rotors are so thick, if you align the caliper, the rotor will align the pistons.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Which is super cool.
So that alleviates some of the evenness where the pistons need to move.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. At least
Honestly,
it keeps that consistent feeling.
Who was that guy that said that bikes should just be heavier? Because it makes them, I can't remember, but wow, he was onto something. But I do think, just to go back to this caller's question, and it's more of a comment, I find that your braking style, so for instance, I drop into a trail, I apply the brakes once, we go to 30% and they stay there. For that, I think that something with the gravity bleed, like Shimano, works really well. I think that Shimano basically works better for people who tend to drag the brakes a bit more, which I think I do. And I think SRAM works better for people who are actually really good at short, sharp braking pulses to keep the consistency. Because otherwise I find that if you brake like I do on SRAMs, you tend to just get the right point migrates in over time.
Well, with the codes for sure. I think that Mavens have improved on that just because like they can tolerate a bit more heat.
To be fair,
I mean, I like the first set of Mavens I had were on that HD6 that I took to New Zealand, and like first bleed, they were perfect. Rode them for months and they were amazing. Loved them. And then I had a couple other issues on bikes given to me for reviews and whatever that were able to be resolved. But yeah, I would still put Mavens up there. MT7s with the race pads, the gold ones. Those are very crispy, very sharp, very quick engagement, and like a nice even power throughout. I will say that can change quite a bit depending on every brake on where your lever position is set to. Yeah. And basically, the closer the lever is to the perpendicular, the more force you're going to get earlier on. Like somebody else had used another test bike with those Maguras, and they had the lever set like really far into the bar. So like the lever was almost touching the bar when it engaged, and there was just no power. I was like, oh, this person's going to have a terrible time on these brakes, but I think they're amazing because I set them up differently.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of that element to all brakes as well. But other options, I'd put the TRP DHR Evos up there, as well as the Haze with the metallic pads, preferably on an e-bike, just to resist any fade.
I think as well, something, maybe this is one for the philosophers, but when you bleed a brake and it deteriorates over time, where does the oil go? And basically, so which suggests to me that basically either the capacity wasn't maximized to begin with because of aeration of the fluid, or basically as a brake works, it's, we have this thing called a diaphragm, which basically adjusts in pressure so you get consistent brake feel. But sometimes what can happen is the diaphragm can't pressurize quickly enough to create that really positive brake feel. And so that can be because there's basically almost the pistons are so far out that the relationship is and the balance is slightly off. So, and no, I'm going to say it again, but doing a good bleed with well-prepared fluid is the answer to most.
It is.
Most of the world's ills, I would say.
But why is it so hard
really
to replicate all the time?
I think it's hard I think brake bleeds, I think that sometimes, and this is only my experience, so happy to be wrong, I think sometimes people think that they're really consistent with their procedure, but actually there's a difference between how I make how I chop an onion at home compared to how a chef chops an onion. And what I mean by that is, like, you might both get both in the frying pan, but there's a large amount of difference with the consistency and just the detail. I think if you can really have a procedure that is not just doing the things, but doing them exactly as prescribed. And I mean, the biggest thing is just prepping the fluid. Like, you could do everything right, and if your fluid isn't prepped, it'll be bad.
But in this day and age, with people being able to design a brake from the ground up and having the implementation of video how-tos, is it not possible to make that process replicatable for everybody?
I think there is, and I would say that's what Shimano have done, but their bucket. I don't think you can really go too far wrong. It's mineral oil that doesn't aerate.
Every person who's a lifelong Shimano user has their own iteration on the Shimano
That's
bleed.
So true. Yeah.
And that is the thing that bugs me most about those brakes is anytime they're mentioned, there's 90 different opinions on how to get them best.
And you walk around the bike 3 times in a counterclockwise direction.
Yeah, exactly. You clap your hands.
Yeah. You sing Believe by Cher, and then you get into it every single time.
Like my preferred bleed for those takes like a day, because you leave a strap on the brake to get like any air bubble migration up to the lever. Like that isn't sustainable. So like doing the prescribed method works pretty well, but I don't know. I don't think that's the perfect solution. I'd venture a guess that the next Maven, if I don't know, they're always working on something, but I'd guess the next Maven has like a simplified setup process. Like, I doubt they'll change the performance of the brake, but the user friendliness maybe would be altered. But
I was looking at my vacuum bleeder the other day, and I was thinking,
you're gonna blow up so many diaphragms.
Hot dog. I'm not saying I would, but I was also like, I wonder if that's how they do it in the factory. I can't imagine there's some, thousands.
You can use a vacuum bleeder for motorcycle brakes.
Yeah.
It's not quite to the same extreme.
I've always wondered why they don't just submerge the brake system in like a gigantic vat of whatever oil and
maybe they do, and they're just all in scuba dive. Maybe they're
there's like
under the fluid as well.
Who's like an atmosphere below the fucking surface of dot fluid, and
just a massive vat. There isn't that Rick and Morty thing where at the bottom and he like releases the bones.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man.
Well, I think we've not answered his question to quite a good extent. Should we move on?
Yeah, I think we gave some recommendations. Also, if you already own those brakes, like give them have the mechanic bleed them or do it yourself and follow the videos. I don't know. I mean, warranty is always your friend as well.
That's so true. Yeah.
Sometimes things don't come great. Yeah.
Right. Well, let's go on to the next question.
Okay, Pinkbike, it's time for you to use that significant industry sway to address a terminology issue. I think it's high time that we stop talking about the sorts of pedals that you clip into as clipless pedals.
I agree.
Look, I'm in my 40s. I get it. I thought I was so cool that my first mountain bike had toe straps and clips, but it's not helping anyone anymore. And I tell you what, if you do this, it'll go some way to redressing the karmic balance for Pinkbike introducing the phrase down country.
Okay. This is more of a comment. He just fired it, and I thought, you know what? Fair fucks. But
I like that.
I would say the problem is that if people don't know that we're correcting, we need to basically do a public service announcement and put it out like enough is enough.
I think it's almost like a better just quiet change. Like it's happened slowly, but if you just refer to them as clip pedals, it will eventually become the nomenclature. Yeah, me too. I call them clips.
Well, the French call them clicks.
Clicks.
Click in.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Clicks. Maybe that's it. You know,
click
you know
less.
How we
click less.
You know how my favorite so we call them walkie-talkies, which sounds very sensible. In France, they call them talkie-walkies, which sounds ridiculous, but obviously both are ridiculous.
They're both ridiculous.
Yeah. I didn't One-Up just call theirs the clip pedal? Like, it's marketed as that. Yeah.
So
drop the less.
Yeah.
Right.
There you go. Flatless.
I think I will probably at times occasionally accidentally say clipless, but clip pedal is fine.
Well, Dario, this is on you. You've got to fucking pull your socks up.
For the record as well, I have no karmic debt when it comes to the term down country. I've never used that in an official capacity.
Have you not?
No.
I thought you did the Downival on your down country bike. That really
I think I just called it a trail bike as I will continue to do so.
But anyway, well, we're going to...
I'm not using. I don't think it's a descriptive term. I appreciate the novelty, but that's about it.
Okay, fair enough. It's almost as if it was all tongue in cheek and it got out of hand. But
exactly.
That can't be true.
Well, and to Levy's credit, like I don't think he intended it to be this like sweeping industry wide change. It's just turned into that.
Well, now we've got enduro. Is it enduro hard? What was it?
Yeah, hard enduro. I am enduro hard.
I am enduro hard. That's just just techno music raging in the background. Let's go on to the next question.
Hi Henry, it's Jez from the Derbyshire Dales, and your first ever question person.
Holy shit! Welcome back.
Asked a question on this little format you've got going on here, which is really cool. So thanks a lot for that. In answer to your feedback from should I move on to a 29 or stay on 650B, I'm kind of going mixed wheel, so thanks a lot for that. I'm still on the lookout for a good bike, but I have another question for you. In fact, it's a comment. Henry, what a terrible idea to put transmission fluid on the chain. I don't know if you know this, but transmission fluid is there to attract dirt and to actually magnetize. It will sometimes got magnets like me. All of this stuff is there to attract dirt and put it into your chain and grind it away. You need the Teflon to repel dirt. So after that revelation, any of you or the Pinkbike team had a wonderful idea which turned out to be terrible. All right. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you for your comment. Firstly, I would say the transmission lube, it works really well. We don't know how they built the pyramids, but they built them. I don't know how it works, but it does. It works a treat. But although it sounds like you've got old lady science on your side, I've got lots of things wrong in mountain biking, and I've gone down many rabbit holes. I think the thing I probably went a bit too hard in on and thought they were answer to all of the world's ills was tire inserts. I think they have a place. I think for some people, some of the time, they can be really, really good. But I think I went in on tire inserts and using like a thinner tire, heavier insert. And now I've actually just gone to like using heavy, like a 1,300 gram tire instead of a 1,000 gram tire and a 300 gram insert. It's simpler. I think gives a better, like more comfort maybe. And now that I've actually gone higher pressures, like I've gone higher pressures across the board, it's sort of undermined the stability benefits that I was getting from the insert anyway. Yeah, that would be my thing, that I think I went in hard and was singing it from the rooftops for anyone that would listen. And I think I was a bit far off that and internal cable routing. Listen,
that is an easy
headset
wrong.
routing, they they could be trusted. I thought we could have a nice thing. I thought that internal headset routing was going to be like on those Scott bikes and those Bold bikes where it's completely hidden and it looks like you're riding a spaceship. It looks amazing. I didn't realize internal headset routing was going to be moving the port an inch and having lots more complication for no aesthetic payoff. Mm-hmm. And that, I think, is bullshit. When it's actually really done nice, I can make my peace with it.
If it is a spaceship, it's a spaceship that doesn't actually have any rocket propulsion and is instead just carried by an ocean of bike mechanics that are doing way too much work to make it look good. I think that's my beef with it. It's like, even when it looks nice, it sucks to work on and to set up.
It does, but once you have it set up, I mean, this idea that, you know, in case you need to change a hose, whatever, but the hoses are more likely to be needed to change if they're outside the frame, if they're protected inside. I saw a Pinkbike comment that was really, really great, and he was saying that when they make the carbon layup, they should just put the hose in, and then you just tighten 2 nuts. It should be amazing.
Maybe I don't know. Yeah.
No, what would be wrong with that? Maybe we're going to get too far down a rabbit hole here. Ultimately, I accept that I'm wrong about this, and I'm in the minority. And Pinkbike community, I humbly ask for your forgiveness. We've all made mistakes. I'm coming back to the light. Matt, was there anything that you've perhaps gone slightly far down the rabbit hole on? Anything you jumped into, thought it was going to be the solution to all the world's ills, and it turns out that it's just a bicycle part after all?
Oh, I'm sure there's been lots. I think the most recent one, I tried a couple of years ago on a downhill bike. I was like, I'm going to go take my BMX grips, which are just like, you know, regular push-on rubber grips. I'm going to put them on my downhill bike. I hear that's the way motocross bikes used to be for a while. Some downhill riders love it. I'm going to give it a go. And the thing about a BMX is that you hardly ride it in any weather or adverse conditions. And although you can glue and tie wire the grips onto the bar, that makes it such a hassle to do anything else related to removing controls and changing the bar, changing the grips. So yeah, the push-on grips, would never put those on a mountain bike again, just because they're downright dangerous too. Like unless you
like throttling.
Yeah, unless you do the whole.
Were you wiring them?
I was just saying, yeah, unless you wire them and glue them, but then it's like such a commitment, and like one little crash and you probably destroy them. Like they're pretty fragile, especially the foam ones on an XC bike. So that would be mine. I mean, it's not too massive of a change from the norm, but yeah, the push-on grips, I wouldn't go back.
Nice.
That's fair.
I don't know. I worry about the throttle. Something feeling really good in there, and then you just pump through something and your wrists just go, and
they were comfy. They were definitely comfier, but not worth the hassle.
Do you think that comfort, compliance, carbon, this contour, bar profiles, all this shit? Do you think mountain bikes have got more comfortable?
Yeah, 100%.
I think they also have as well.
Yeah.
What do you put that down to? Because
I think it's material science in a way.
Is it material?
We've learned to do more with less, and when you have less, you can have more deflection. I mean, that's one element of it.
I think also the size of the bike, like you're just more comfortable, you're able to relax, you're not as tense. The bikes are longer, it's more stable. Your body relaxes, you're not moving around the bike to find balance and grip as much. And then that allows for other things to happen, like softer wheels, softer, more progressive, faster suspension. You're not relying on the fork being rock solid to hold you up. You don't need to run ultra slow rebound on the shock. So yeah, there's a whole myriad of reasons there, but
I think, with bikes that I'm getting better in recent years, that's something that often not talked that much about, but that's one of the big things for me is my bike is such a comfortable place to be. Although saying that, we talked about it last week, but I did go climbing. I started going very sporadically, and I'm like barely getting off the ground, like barely. But for a week later, my hands, it was the first time in years I was like getting arm pump.
Oh, rock climbing.
Yeah.
In the gym.
Yeah. It's weird. They put all the absolute hardest moves on like the 510s and the 5.9s. because each gym's going to have one impossible move. It always surprises me that it's on the beginner climbs. They probably miss a hand grip or something. It's so weird. It's so weird to me. But hey, mistakes happen. Human error. Dario, what's something that you got wildly wrong?
Quite a few as well, but I think I'd put
mustache.
the mustache. The mistake that keeps coming. I've been thinking about shaving it off recently. It's just kind of it's time. Yeah,
I thought you were doing a group test on mustache oils. That was looking for that.
Yeah, like what suspension fluid is best for mustache wax?
Yes, the transmission
Fox Gold 20 weight. I think mine would be Cockpit stuff. I for a while was really into the super short stem with a bar that's a bit further swept back than typical. So like, a 13-degree bar or something like that to try to get the steering axis at 0, like over the center of the fork. And there are some people out there who are evangelizing this still, and that's fine and dandy, just not better for me. I went back to like 40 to 50 mil stem with a super flat Renthal bar, and it feels great. I think you can get used to anything. That's kind of my broader answer to this question is like, you could convince yourself that anything is better if you spend enough time on it. So, yeah.
Well, that's funny. That's something I was late to the party too. I stuck with 50 mil stems on enduro bikes for a long time. Because when the gap was 50 to 35, I still hate 35 mil stems with a passion. I think they're awful. I just hate what they do to the bike. And so much so I conflated, but now, and it sounds really lame, but the 42 mil stem has the 40 now is great, 42 mils, like 40, whatever. But I really was reluctant to go any shorter than 50 for a long time. And on a downhill bike, I still want a 50 mil stem. The idea of there's that Bergtech one, which is like what?
25.
Matt's got one of those.
Is a death sentence.
They also have a 10
to me. But it's riding style. 10 mil.
I think you have to start sizing the bike differently too for stuff like that. But I don't know. To me, it was interesting, but not better necessarily. And then for the ease of other things like repeatability and sizing a bike, I think it kind of did a deficit. Plus to say, like, I think that bikes are generally optimized to handle with the normal cockpit setup. So, for me at least, testing bikes, like that's what I'm going to use. I'm not going to plant this like really weird cockpit onto a bunch of test bikes and say like, oh yeah, it works great as long as you run a 10 mil stem with a 20-degree bar,
and go up 2 sizes, and it only works in this scenario, this type of trail.
Right. I also think a lot of the people who are evangelizing that setup are making weird concessions to make it work better. Like you end up setting your fork up in a different way to get better front end grip because you're not weighting it quite the same way. You do a bunch of different things, and yes, it works, but at the cost of other things. So I don't know.
Oh, that's the point. I rode one of those reverse raised, these RR bikes ones.
Get that big dog.
The big dog. Yeah, that was a stem. That was definitely a stem.
It definitely connected the handlebars to the fork.
It did. You know what? That's what I found in my review. It connected the steering the steerer to the handlebars. On to the next question.
Hi, really enjoy your podcast. Question on tire inserts.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, my question is, which of the Pinkbike staff are riding with tire inserts, and why or why not? Thanks. That's all I got.
This is I may say to myself, some good producing here. Did you see how
you really
these things have gone together?
That.
Pretty nice, hey? Pretty nice. Tire inserts. Can you guys quickly just explain your experience with them? Was there ever a time, Matt, starting with you, did you hop on the bandwagon at any point? Did you come off? Did you go back on? And where are you now?
I wasn't a fan at first due to installation problems I had seen from other friends go through. I did give them a go. I do think they have benefits in certain scenarios on certain bikes and certain trails, and they definitely work for some people. For me, I've found that the added benefit of more stability in the tire wasn't as necessary for what I like to ride at my weight and whatever. And that they actually added an element of harshness, especially to the back wheel, by maybe making the air spring in the tire more progressive. And it just felt like the bumps were harder on the back wheel. Don't know why. And that just seemed to be what I found, but they can definitely work for some people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's potentially reduce the stroke of your tire before it hits what is like an elastomer. If we talked about it in fork terms, it would be an elastomer that takes up half the stroke. Dario, what would your take be?
I ran them for years because I lived in a place where you'd just go through rims and tires if you didn't. There, they served a really simple purpose, and that was just adding durability to the bike. I wasn't really doing it for ride feel benefit. Around here, also over the years, downhill tires have gotten a lot better and a bit more multi-purpose. So that's my preference now, is running a heavier casing tire and nothing but air and sealant inside. But I am testing some inserts right now, just, a new thing on the market that has some pretty bold claims. That's primarily around adding a additional damping feel, and I have not found that to be the case. So I don't know. For tire stability, I think they make sense. I think the combination of tire and insert is too finicky to call it important on any like broad scale.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Well, that's why I did a burning question article on this a while back now, and tire inserts were actually one of my outs for 2025. They're not hot things. But when I posed the question to the brands, I realized, hey, there isn't one manufacturer that makes a tire, a rim, and an insert. There are some cases where there are manufacturers that make two of each, but not all three. And I think that was most people's answers, most brands' answers, was they kind of pointed, not necessarily pointed the blame, but they were like,
that's true.
We found that these two things work best together. When we put all three together, shit hits the fan. And it was like, well, why doesn't somebody just make all three that work together as a system? It's a wheel.
Yeah.
So
I rode a prototype system towards the end of last year. Actually, had it quite a lot in the bike park over the season. I think they'll be released this year. That is something that I'll be following with keen interest. That was a system that finally, I don't know what it is about me. I think I'm just such like a fucking meat-headed rider. I just destroy wheels and tires constantly. And in the bike park, it was the thing that let me brake. You go to a high pivot bike or a bike with like an O-chain or whatever, and you realize how much braking capacity you unlock, how much you can just brake harder over rougher surfaces. And then I'd find myself cooking a lot of wheels. And then going to this system on that Commencal Supreme, I was like, I can do whatever I want. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but I can do whatever. Like, there's a bit, that Filthy Ape.
Yeah.
That basically this big rock roll, bottom out at the bottom, like harsh, like G out. And normally, going down something like that, you are almost modulating your braking to not impact the rim as much as you are for grip. And I remember riding that and realizing the tire was still really good. I'd be really curious to see when they come out how they review. And it's not nothing to do with me reviewing parts anymore. But I'd be very curious to see someone, one of you guys ride them and see what you think. Cause
that was a pneumatic system, I believe. So a bit more.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to go into it because I might have signed an NDA.
No, we got contacted by them recently. So
cool.
I'm not adding any information, but conceptually, I think it makes sense. It's a bit more high fidelity than just a piece of foam. And you can adjust it as you would tire pressure in theory. So I'm curious to try those.
Yeah, anyway.
I have, I don't know. I think inserts have their place, if durability is the goal and you're running the right wheels, that's a good bet. That's the issue though, is, like Matt, your burning question brought up the point that a lot of wheel manufacturers think inserts break rims. So I think that's a concern as well.
I think a real good use of inserts, to my mind, is if you have a, say, a trail enduro bike, that style of bike that, maybe twice a year you take to a bike park or an uplift day, and you're very happy with your 1,000 gram, 1,100 gram Exo style tire, Exo Plus tire. Mm-hmm. You can have a set of inserts that you keep for years, and you just put them in for the bike park. And because you don't need to then go to a downhill tire, which maybe and then because I find personally that if I'm riding those Exo Plus style tires in the bike park, the squirming just undermines.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
just higher speed trails. Like it's just
like day-to-day riding, it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't matter so much. When you're like hauling ass into a corner, it starts feeling weird.
And like you're going so fast, and the turns sometimes have so much support that you can just get so much squirming. And for that alone, I think they're actually a really good safety thing that can actually be a good value. You buy one set, and as long as you keep that wheel set size, you just keep them for years. And when you go somewhere on holiday, whatever, pop them in, keep your normal tires, and it saves that having to splash out $7,000 on a front and rear new downhill casing tire. I mean, sometimes it's cheaper just to buy a whole new bike than it is to buy 2 tires. The markup's quite insane nowadays. I think that's all our questions. Thank you very much for joining me in the studio, Matt. Dario, thank you for joining me from wherever you are, state prison. I think Johnny Cash is playing in the background. Thank you very much for listening, of course, and watching on YouTube or the Pinkbike homepage. If you have a question, please do leave us a message, and we will do our best to feature it. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.